Joining me now is Nick Robinson, Strategy and Investment Leader at DairyNZ. And DairyNZ have been doing some amazing work to try and attract people into the sector, not just new graduates, but also people who might be liking a bit of a change and wanting to work in this amazing sector. So we're going to look at GoDairy and also the futures that people have got in the dairy industry. Now, the Great Futures in Dairying plan sets out how we can attract, retain and grow our workforce on farm. Now, it's a 10-year plan. It highlights the challenges the dairy sector faces with the workforce shortage. More importantly, though, it identifies initiatives to improve workforce retention and continue to build a sustainable and thriving dairy sector. So, Nick, tell me about Great Futures in Dairying. It was launched in June this year, and why there's a need for it. Hello.
Hi, well, pleased to meet you, Rowena. The Great Futures and Dairying plan was brought about from us needing to build a more sustainable workforce, one that brings Kiwis into the workforce and also keeps more people in the workforce. We knew there was a problem. COVID raised a problem for us as the borders shut and we weren't able to get international workers like we had in the past. And Great Futures and Dairying was about going out and talking to the sector around what are the issues with workforce, attraction, retention and growth, and what can we do about them. So we talked to farmers up and down the country, and we've come up with a plan, a 10-year plan for how we can address those shortages.
Fantastic. So talk me through some of the statistics. How many people do we have in the dairy sector? How many people do we need in the dairy sector?
Good question. So the sector, the on-farm we employ about 37,000 people, and that there's some seasonal adjustment to that. We think we're about 4,000 to 6,000, but maybe around 4,000 people short, which averages out to be about 1.7, a third of dairy farms being about 1.7 farmers short. So there's a real shortage.
Yeah, that's huge as well. And as you say, it's not something that's been a new problem, but it was really exacerbated by COVID.
Yeah, COVID shut the borders, which meant, about 40% of our new incoming workforce was international workforce. So all of a sudden we weren't able to get those workers across the border. We did work hard with government around a border exception, so we were able to bring nearly 1,000 workers in, but it was nowhere near enough to reach the shortage that we had.
No, it seemed as though the industry was crying out for people. The government was saying they were coming, but it wasn't always at the right time of year. And actually to get them literally into New Zealand actually was a real challenge around the red tape and everything like that. It wasn't an easy process.
It wasn't an easy process. DairyNZ worked really hard in the background to make it easier for farmers, but there were still hoops to jump through, and it wasn't easy. But there were farmers, as I said, I think 765 people were granted exceptions, and it was such relief to see them coming into the country.
Yeah, well, that was 700 people we didn't have beforehand, great to see. What are the key problems, though, that underpin the dairy sector's workforce challenge?
Well, first of all, we're quite heavily reliant on people to operate. So, it takes people to feed calves, to bring the cows in, to milk, to do farm maintenance. So we're not all robots.
Yeah, automation's come a long way, but we still need people.
Yeah, exactly. Secondly, we're probably not attracting enough of the right people into the sector. So, and that's one of the reasons why we need to work with international workers, is to bring people outside of New Zealand in. So we're not attracting enough. And then thirdly, we're not retaining enough people. So we have, it's a seasonal workforce, so there are people that cycle out, but we lose around 50% of our workforce every 2 years, and so we're not keeping people and growing them well enough.
That's huge. Now, there's been a lot of studies, haven't there, that have come up with quite a few trends around the workforce.
Mm-hmm. I think what you're talking about is around bringing in those people from secondary school into the workforce, and so there are those people. But there's also been a lot of work around career changes and how they can also be attracted into the workforce as well.
Yeah, because it's not just about getting your school leavers interested in dairy. There are so many people out there who might just become disillusioned with where their career's going and want something with a bit more of a future.
Yeah, it's a really great career. Look, just today I was just talking to a mechanic who's now a share milker.
Brilliant.
And, there are those pathways existing, and people who look for working with animals, working in the outdoors, it's a really great option.
Yeah, well, hey, I went from radio to dairy farming.
Yeah.
Did go back to radio, but missed the farming. So, yeah, it is possible to bounce in and out of the industry as well.
Yep.
Look, up until the borders closed, 40% of new entrants into the dairy were international workers. You know, this was a huge number.
Yeah, and a big proportion of those come from Southeast Asia. And so what COVID does is it completely stopped that pipeline of workers, and now we're having to start up that cycle again. New Zealand dairy is in a good place with immigration settings, so we're on the green list, which means it has made it easier for us to get workers. But it's still not an easy task. There's still boxes to be ticked, and you've still got to be able to attract them into New Zealand and get them into the country.
I don't think a lot of us actually fully grasped how reliant we were on overseas labour until COVID hit, until it was taken away from us.
Yeah, and during that period there were also some really sad stories about families being dislocated, workers being overseas when the borders closed and not able to return. So the impacts were remarkable.
Yeah, and especially on farm owners and employers who didn't know where the end in sight was. Did they fill that job? Did they wait for their worker to be allowed back into the country? No one knew where the line in the sand was going to be.
Yeah, and look, we worked with farmers and worked with the government and saying, look, these people are stuck overseas, what do you do? Some farmers waited 18 months before they did anything. They kept jobs open, etc.
Because they're part of the family, they're part of the community.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, how's the labour shortage affecting people and farming businesses as a whole?
Well, first of all, it impacts stress and well-being.
Yeah.
We know that there are many, many farmers out there really stressed from having lack of people because they're having to take up the work themselves, take up the slack. We know that there are retired farmers coming in and helping the family, things like that, so there's that issue. It also raises the risk around health and safety because people are tired. It raises the risks around animal welfare. Again, people are tired. And also other critical work such as planning, financial planning, things like that just gets put on the back burner. And that's important work. But yeah.
A lot of times, I know when people get under pressure, they think they can just work harder, they can work more hours, and it's going to be okay, but it's not.
It's not. And we've heard many stories about farmers doing that, and that's why it's so important that we have a plan so that we can get the workers that we need into the workforce.
And the other aspect of that is that your satisfaction from your job, from your work, actually starts to dissipate if it becomes more of a stress than actually something you enjoy doing every single day.
Yeah, and this is a great sector to be in, but we are hearing stories of farmers going, look, the workforce shortages are such a problem, I've had enough.
Yeah.
And that's a really sad story because it's such a dynamic, great industry to be in.
Yeah. So how will, the likes of GoDairy and stuff like that, how will they help solve the problem?
Well, look, one of the reasons why I'm dressed like a trucker today...
Yeah, I'm loving the safety first high vis.
Yeah, is...
Stylish.
GoDairy is about attracting those people who are career changers, so like the mechanics and other people, as well as secondary school people.
And the broken down radio hosts.
Exactly, into the sector and into jobs. So it's about connecting people to real life jobs that are currently going. And that's one part of the Great Futures in Dairying plan is actually connecting people to jobs better. The Great Futures in Dairying plan is actually calling for a reset. So it's not just tinkering around the edges. We actually have to think quite deeply about how we go about our business around attracting a workforce. So that is things like shaping up. How do we remain competitive, not just within our own sector, but within other sectors? Because that's one of the things the research has shown is that there's all this intra-competition between construction and hospo and things like that. Everybody wants good people. So there's around how do we sort of become more competitive. The second aspect was how do we change the job? How do we create modern, productive and safe workforces? So that's looking at robotics and technology, as well as looking at things like rosters and are there different ways that we can slice up jobs so that they can be more attractive to workforce?
Absolutely, because when I was dairy farming it was 12 and 2.
Yeah.
No correspondence will be entered into, that is it, 12 and 2, that's the job. And it just can't stay that way.
No, it can't, and there's a lot of variety and there's a lot of experimentation going on at the moment around different rosters. And lastly, we need to look in new places. So what the research said is we've got a shrinking pool of 20 to 30-year-olds.
Yeah.
And a shrinking pool of 20 to 30-year-olds in rural communities where we normally pulled our workforce from. So we have to go broader in where we get our workers from. It's from urban areas, it's from Māori and Pacific. We just need to really broaden the way we look at our workforce.
Yeah, and make the sector attractive because I think once you actually start to get the bug, it's really hard to walk away from dairy. Speaking from experience here.
Yeah, and you
You just
talk,
need that spark.
you know, you talk to people who are new to the sector a year in, year out, and all of a sudden they've got so much more autonomy in their work. They're not having to commute. You know, these are people who are coming from city jobs to jobs in dairy. They're having a whole lifestyle change, which they hadn't expected. So there's really good options.
So the whole GoDairy project, it's really ambitious.
Yeah, it definitely is. We want to help farmers address that workforce issue. And it's not just about the 4,000 short that we're currently short. It's about keeping and helping farmers keep their workers so that they're not constantly having to look for new workers. So yeah, very
Fantastic.
ambitious.
You're just not trying to just put a Band-Aid on it.
No.
And your website, godairy.co.nz, a whole heap of resources on there.
Yep, and we're doing advertising campaign and just really trying to make it easier and reduce the barriers for people to find jobs.
Yeah, brilliant. Hey, look, it's been so great to chat to you. Nick Robinson, Strategy and Investment Leader for GoDairy at DairyNZ. All the best. As I say, it is an ambitious project, but it's something that is so crucial to the future of the dairy industry. So go well and all the best.
Ah, thank you.